Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voice of the Prophet Ministries. My name is Janelle, and if you are watching us for the first time, whether on Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook, I want to thank you for watching. And if you are a returning subscriber or follower, thank you for coming back again as well. And so on today, we are continuing our series on the prophetic and mental health. This is part 3 of the series. If you would like to go ahead and watch any of the other previous episodes of this series, I will have the link up here somewhere. You can click on it. So we're going to go ahead with part 3. And today's episode is entitled Stop Running. Stop running. And so if you are unfamiliar or this is your first time watching, this is a series in which the Lord has given me an assignment to talk about how what the correlation is between prophets, prophetic people, and mental health. Why is there a strain? Why is there a struggle? Why does it seem like prophets and prophetic people struggle so much in the area of their mind? And so we talked last week on the place of where our gifts can kind of cause us to be in the place of, being overwhelmed in the areas where God has given us to see, to discern, to hear, right? It can sometimes feel as though it's too much for us to handle and bear. And so again, if you want to go ahead and watch those episodes, you can go ahead and click on the link, right? And so we're going to go ahead into this next part because the Lord has been really dealing with me with a place of mental battle and struggle as it pertains to prophet, but especially those who have not accepted the place of who they are. It's not like the first episode where we're saying we're ignorant, we don't know, but no, there are some people out there who have been literally running. You have been on the run from God, and you are running from your call, running from your purpose, because you do not want to have to deal with all that comes with being a prophet. And so what happens here when your gift, the thing that God is giving you, which is the ability to see, to hear, to perceive, to understand certain things on another level that other people have not been gifted with, what happens when that gift doesn't feel like a gift? What happens when the gift that God is giving you, the gift of God, right? It feels more like a burden than a blessing. What happens when who God has called for you to be, who God has made you and formed for you to be, feels hard on you? When the very person that God has called you, it feels as though it is literally warring against you. So watch this. Being a prophet is no easy task. Like I said before on other episodes, I am a prophet of God. I was a born prophet, meaning that I have had experiences with God from a very early age. And so I understand the place. I understand the place where, of seeing and hearing, understanding. And a lot of times growing up, I didn't really understand or could put two and two together of what I was sensing, but I knew that I was different. And so being a prophet comes with a lot of persecution, right? And what I have found on this walk with God, an even greater place of me coming into the acceptance of my call, right? Because like I said, I'm a prophet and I've been a prophet, but I haven't always accepted that place of being a prophet. Why? A lot of years I ran from being committed to the call because I knew that it was going to be a lot of warfare associated with it. And there was another level of yielding and saying yes to God that I just was not ready for. And that's just the honest truth, right? And so being a prophet comes with a lot of persecution. And so being a child of God, being a follower of Jesus already comes with a certain level of persecution already. But then there's another depth, right? There's a different space of persecution that comes with being a prophet, and that it comes in the form of spiritual warfare, psychological warfare. The enemy comes to fight us very heavily in our minds. Why? Because those are the gates of our perception. That is how God speaks to us. That is the place where God begins to reveal things to us. So he comes to block, he comes to confuse, and so forth. And then there's another place of physical persecution, like we've seen, right? In the natural, like we've seen in the Bible, where the Old Testament prophets, they literally were persecuted. Some of them were stoned, beaten, lashed, whipped, and some of them were actually put to death, right? Just because they were staying true to God's word. And so there's a prophet in the Bible who I absolutely love to read about because he is just so vulnerable and open about his walk. And so not that any of the other prophets' words were not open and vulnerable, but we just see another layer and depth of the human side of this prophet, and that is the prophet Jeremiah. And so Jeremiah, if you don't know, he was called to be a prophet from a very young age. You can read Jeremiah 1. And so they coined him the weeping prophet. Why? Because Jeremiah lamented so much throughout his book. Like, he would be prophesying and then he would just go into this space of lamenting, literally saying, why was I born? I cursed the day I was born. Cursed the person who told my father this and that on the day I was born, because of the things that he encountered and that he went through. And he's the one who wrote the book of Lamentation. So they coined him the weeping prophet. But what I love about Jeremiah is the place of vulnerability, because we didn't just get to see the prophetic words that he was given to utter, but he also, began to scribe and to write out. And I feel like he used his book even as a journal, like an outlet, literally an outlet to express his feelings. And we got to see the real human side of the prophet, the real human walk of the prophet, and how it's not easy, and the experiences that he encountered and the suffering that he had to suffer from the people around him, and even the inner turmoil that he was literally, angry with God. So look, we're going to talk about 3 reasons why we should stop running. 3 reasons why. And if you're a prophet and you're running, I want to talk to you today. 3 reasons why you should stop running. So number 1, you cannot run from what is in you. You cannot run from what is in you. So like I talked about before, Jeremiah felt this way, the same way what I was talking about. Like, he felt as though God literally tricked him into becoming a prophet. He literally felt like the Lord had called him into this place, and he was not fully aware of all the things that came with this call. And many of us, right? Because sometimes the prophetic walk can look like a glitz and glam, especially nowadays, right? Because back in the day, being a prophet was not glitz and glams. Like, no, that was not that place that we are now. But many times being a prophet can look like glitz and glam, right? But we're not really aware of what comes with having this awareness, and what comes with sitting in the seat of the prophet. That there is a place of yielding, saying yes, and also the place of having to stand up against satanic attacks when you come to sit in this seat that God has called you to. So a lot of people are ignorant of what comes with the call, and because you're ignorant, the Bible talks about his people perish because of lack of knowledge. And so because we're ignorant, then we don't know how to navigate, and we don't know how to walk with God when we come up to hard places. So a lot of prophets, they begin to run. They begin to jump ship when they begin to face hard times, the enemy coming to fight against them and everything like that. They get persecuted from the outside, all of that. They begin to run. So watch this. Jeremiah faced this place, right, where he was like, look, you called me to be a prophet, and now he's getting persecuted. So he got so angry and upset that he literally, right, said, I'm not going to prophesy anymore. And how many of you on here have ever been in that place? Like, is this worth it? Like, I am doing what God has called me, but it seems as though I'm literally being punished for being who and doing what God has called me to do. And so let's go here. Jeremiah 20 verse 7. And it says this. O Lord, you misled me, and I allowed myself to be misled. You are stronger than I am, and you overpowered me. Can anybody attest to this? Now I am mocked every day. Everyone laughs at me. When I speak, the words burst out. Violence and destruction I shout. So these messages from the Lord have made me a household joke. And I want to pause right here really quickly, because many of you who are on here, and I feel this strongly because I have even encountered this, and I have even felt this about myself sometimes. And in here, Jeremiah was coined the weeping prophet, but he also was what they also nicknamed him such as a doomsday prophet. And a lot of prophets, even living in this time, because we are living in perilous times, we're all living in the end days, we don't really get to say what we want to say. We don't get to prophesy we want to prophesy. And so Jeremiah was living in a time of God's judgment. So he had to prophesy what God gave him. He couldn't say anything else, or he'll be a false prophet. And so because of that, they began to make fun of him. They began to call him all these types of names and whatever. And to the point where Jeremiah was like, look, I don't want to keep prophesying this. I don't want to keep speaking this. Is there anybody on here who can attest or relate to what I'm saying? And so let's continue. And he says this, but if I say I'll never mention the Lord or speak in his name, His words burn in my heart like fire. It's like a fire in my bones. I am worn out trying to hold it in. I cannot do it. So watch this, because this scripture is it's been taken out of context, and we're not going to get into that, but it's been really taken out of context, especially if you grew up like in like a church that's like Baptist church or something like that, and I'm not trying to dog anybody or throw anything like that, but it's what I've seen. And so when you begin to shout, they sing songs like, oh, it's fire shut up in my bones, right? And this is where they got that song for that thing from, right? But here, when you read it, you realize that this is not a time that Jeremiah felt like shouting. Like, no, this was not a pleasant feeling. This feeling that Jeremiah was feeling, he said, it burns in my heart like fire. It is consuming to me. If you've ever had a broken leg, a splintered leg, anybody who had a bruised bone, that pain is not a pleasant pain. I'm a nurse, and it's very hard to medicate someone who has a bone injury, right? Because to be able to reach those nerves in the bone, right? And so having fire in your bone is not a pleasant feeling. This is not something that he wanted to go shout to the rooftop, fire shut up in my bones. Like, no, no. This is not what Jeremiah was saying. He's saying, listen, I am worn out. He says, literally, I'm worn out trying not to prophesy. I'm literally in pain, struggling, trying to sit and hold on to the word that God has given me, because I know if I release this, what's going to come. But watch this. There was an issue. Just because Jeremiah decided that he was not going to prophesy does not mean that he wasn't a prophet. Just because you decide that you don't want to prophesy, you don't want to speak what God says because it's going to come with a certain level of persecution, does not make you not a prophet. You are still a prophet. And so watch this. What happened was, here Jeremiah was literally warring against his spirit and his flesh. There was a tug of war, and at the end of it, he gave in, he submitted to God, and he began to prophesy again. But this place of not wanting to prophesy was a burden that he held. It was a burden on the inside. And when you are a prophet and God begins to give you a word, it is a very difficult thing for you not to release what God has given you. Why? Because like I said before, just because you decide up in your mind, like, I don't want to walk this walk, does not mean that your eyes are going to shut. Does not mean that your ears are going to shut. Does not mean that you're not going to be able to still discern. And so when you try to suppress what it is that you're seeing and hearing, it becomes a mental battle that you have initiated on and brought on to your own self. So watch it. Let me tell you guys this testimony, right? I talk about this a whole lot. So when I first came in really into a greater place in the prophetic in 2019, it was very overwhelming for me. And there was a place of heightening of my discernment, my ears being open, my beginning to see visions. I had not, certain gifts I had not had before these encounters with the Lord. And so as he began to open my eyes and ears, it was a lot, because like I said in the previous video, these gifts are not something that you can just turn on like a light switch and turn off like a light switch. And so no matter where I was, in the mall, in the grocery store, on vacation, trying to eat, trying to take care of my kids, that realm, that spiritual world is open to me. And so it began to really consume me to a point where I was like, look, I told my spiritual mom, I'm like, can he just turn it down a little bit? Can he just turn the volume down? Like, can you just tone it down a little bit? And she began to literally rebuke me. And she says, you are a prophet and you don't get to shut it on and shut it off, right? But at that moment, I just felt like this is a little bit too much for me. Like, I want to live a normal life, and I want to come into the secret place, the throne room or whatever, and gather information or hear melodies from heaven or whatever, when it's convenient for me. And in reality, that's just not how it works. So you cannot run from something that is in you. And if you're a prophet of God, these gifts that God is giving you, it's a calling. It's not something that you are picking up like a phone. No, it is who you are. It is who you are. And I talk about who you are in my book, Chosen. We'll talk about that later. And so the second reason why I want to talk about that you should stop running is because of this place. The more you know, the more you are held accountable. And so let's read this. Luke 12, verse 47 through 48. This is the NLT version. And it says this: and a servant who knows what the master wants, but isn't prepared, and doesn't carry out those instructions will be severely punished. But someone who does not know and then does something wrong will be punished only lightly. When someone has been given much, much will be required in return. And when someone has been entrusted with much, even more will be required. And so in the first part of this series, we talk about You're Not Crazy But Called, and how a lot of people have been diagnosed with mental illnesses and all kind of different things because they don't understand who they truly are. But in this place, what I'm talking about here, I'm not talking to those who don't understand who they are. I'm talking to the ones who are running. I'm talking to the ones who have full awareness of who they are, who God is, who Jesus is, what the gift of God is upon their life. But you just decided that this is too hard for you. And so you're running from your call. And so the Lord began to show me this, right? These two things that happens to you when you decide to become disobedient, and I'm using that lightly, right? Because really when you're running, you're being rebellious. Two things begin to happen to you. Number one, heaven rebukes you. And number two, you open yourself up to unnecessary warfare. So let's go here, because there was a prophet in the Bible, just like Jeremiah, who decided that they didn't want to speak the word that God gave them. So they began to try to run away. Jonah 1, verse 1 through 4. It says this: The Lord gave this message to Jonah, son of Amittai. Get up and go to the great city of Nineveh. Announce my judgment. Come on here, prophets. Against it, because I have seen how wicked its people are. But Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction to get away from the Lord. Now, I'm going to pause right here. Does that make any sense? Prophets of God, we know that we cannot run away from the presence of God because God is omnipresent. His presence is everywhere. And so it continues to say, he went down to the port of Joppa, where he found a ship leaving from Tarshish. He bought a ticket and went on board, hoping to escape from the Lord again by sailing to Tarshish. But the Lord hurled a powerful wind over the sea, causing a violent storm that threatened to break the ship apart. Right? So here it is. Jonah is a prophet. He is not ignorant. He understands a call. He understands a duty. He knows God's voice because when God gave him a message, he knew it was from the Lord. But he decided that he didn't want to prophesy what God had gave him, right? Because it was an undesired assignment. And I talk more in depth about undesired assignments in the book, if you want to pick it up. But he began to literally try to run away from God. And you cannot, number one, like we talked about previously, you cannot run away from your gift. It's inside of you. And number two, you cannot run away from God. So the very elements, literally, God called the very elements to begin to fight against Jonah. And this is what happens when we see, know, experience, hear, right? We haven't been entrusted with much, and then we decide to be rebellious. We decide to go away. Do you think that, number one, God is just going to allow you to know all these things, understand all these things, be attuned to all these things, and then still be rebellious? Absolutely not. So the Lord literally came to fight against Jonah, his servant. Why? Because God says those who he loved, he chastised. And so when you're out of place, the very elements, God himself will come to fight against you. And who can kick against the prick? Who can fight against their master? No one. Name one person in the Bible. Name one person in the earth who has ever gotten away with fighting against the will of the Lord. You don't ever get away, right? You may seem like you're getting away, but you don't ever get away in the end. And so we see here that Jonah, the ship, the wind began to come and all of this stuff. So the men on the boat was trying to figure out what happened. He knew what happened. And a lot of times as prophets, we know why the situations around us, why there's chaos around us, why we don't have any peace. It's because we're literally running. We know why these things are why these things are happening. And if you don't know, I hope I'm helping you. The reason why your life is in chaos right now is because you're running. The reason why there's no peace, the reason why you feel shipwrecked is because you're running from your call, and heaven is fighting against you. Why? Just because where there's obedience, the safest place in the whole wide world is in the will of God. And when we are obedient, God's presence comes. He fights for us. He wars for us. He comes to bring us into the place of peace, right? When we are coming along with him and saying yes to him. And so the very elements begin to come and to fight against Jonah. So out of place prophets open themselves up to uncalled for warfare. So watch this. Number one, the Lord coming to fight against Jonah. But also, number two, hell knows your location. As a prophet of God, as a child of God, hell knows your location. It knows your rank. It knows your level of authority. And so when you decide to demote yourself, when you decide to lower yourself from the place where God has called you, that seat where God has called you, you begin to open up yourself up to uncalled for places, uncalled for warfare. Why? Because you're out of place. So the demons know that you're being rebellious, and they've given access to you because the gate that surrounds you, like Job, right? The God literally began to put a hedge of protection around you. You are the one that is literally open up the hedge when you begin to be rebellious. Begin to open up doors that you ought not to open. When you become rebellious, so you allow satanic attacks to come, you're literally calling them in because you're not in right place where you need to be. So it's called uncalled for warfare. And what does the enemy come to do? He comes to suppress you, comes to wage war on your mind. And so a lot of prophets, again, that's why some people they begin to watch this, lose their mind because of them being in disobedience and rebellious to God. Why? Because the Bible also speaks about this. It says, be not many masters, for greater is the condemnation. Another version says, seek not to be a teacher, because greater is the condemnation, because the more you know, the more God holds you accountable to. And I want to say this because even as myself, and I have another prophetic sister who we perceive things the same way, right? The way that the gifts that God has given us, we have similar gifts. And so even in her life, I began to see, and Lord began to show me, she's very much similar to me, that if we had not chosen to say yes to God, there is no way that we would be standing here in our right mind. Like if we did not choose and would continue to choose to submit to God, there's a level of mental ailment that would come to suppress us, that we would not be able to function on a normal level. Why? Because we have been so open. We have seen too much. God speaks to us on a certain level that we don't get to go back and pretend like we don't know what we know. It's very hard to suppress knowledge that you have learned, experienced, and understood. Listen, it'll cause you to go in a place what's called cognitive dissonance. And it's literally begin to put a strain on your natural mind. And so you don't get to know more and not to be accountable. And we're almost wrapping up. So the third reason why you should stop running, right, as a prophet, is this. As a prophet, you are going to suffer. Right. Either way, like I said, the enemy knows your rank. He knows your location. There's going to be times where he will try to come and confuse you. There's persecution that comes with being a child of God. There's persecution that comes with being a true follower of Jesus Christ, right? Not a Sunday morning Christian, but a true follower of Jesus Christ. There's persecution that comes with it. But it's better to suffer for righteousness' sake, right, than to suffer as a sinner. Right. So Jeremiah 20, verse 10 through 12, it says this. I have heard the many rumors about me. They call me the man who lives in terror. They threaten. If you say anything, we will report it. Even my old friends are watching me, waiting for a fatal slip. He will trap himself, they say, and then we will get our revenge on him. But the Lord stands beside me like a great warrior. Before him, my persecutors will stumble. They cannot defeat me. They will fail and be thoroughly humiliated. Their dishonor will never be forgotten. O Lord of heaven armies, you test those who are righteous and examine the deepest thoughts and secrets. Let me see your vengeance against them, for I have committed my cause to you. And so I wanted to read that. In that little last bit where Jeremiah was kind of venting, like I said, he was being honest, okay? But we don't pray, against our enemies, because Jesus taught us otherwise, okay? But he was being honest, so I'm glad that we get to see his honest place of how he truly felt, because he was being persecuted. But here's the thing about it. There are going to be times where you are going to be persecuted. I totally understand it, especially in these end times. And like I said, there are a lot of prophets on here who are watching that God give you heavy words, words of correction, words of judgment. It's this time that we're in. Does everybody have those words? No. Are you only going to get those types of words? Absolutely not. Because the gift of prophecy and the prophetic, it comes to comfort, comes to bring exhortation, all different kinds of things. It's not just always correction and rebuke, right? There's balance to this. There's a God comes to, like he told Jeremiah, there are some that you're going to have to tear down and some you're going to have to build up. So there's a place where God will come and comfort and bring a building up and a refreshing and so forth. But there are times when God is going to give you what I like to call a hard word, a word that is not pleasant to the ears. It's not going to tingle, the ears of those who are going to hear it. And so they're going to fight against you. And there are people, especially being a prophet, that there's a place of being misunderstood, right? And so there are people who may think like you cuckoo, like what are you talking about? Like where are you getting this information from, right? Because again, being a prophet is not easy. And what I have learned, even reading the Bible, prophets are never accepted in their own generation. And it's just like this repeated cycle of the next generation and that comes and comes and comes. There's nothing new under the sun. And Jeremiah was not accepted in his time. Isaiah was not accepted in his time. Habakkuk was not accepted in his time. It wouldn't be till years later that the next generations would go back and read those prophets' books and begin to esteem them or so forth. And we saw even when Jesus came, he was not accepted when he was on the earth in his time, right? By the majority, absolutely not. Matter of fact, those who even began to hype him up and praise him when the time came for him to get crucified, they turned against him and they began to speak against him. And so we know that prophets are not going to always be accepted. There are going to be those around you who are going to speak ill of you, negative of you. There might be even people that come in the comments to just speak crazy stuff or whatever because they don't understand the things that you understand. They cannot perceive the things that you perceive. They have not seen the things that you have seen. And so because of that, they're ignorant. They don't understand. They will begin to mock what they cannot understand. But guess what? That's okay. People are not always going to accept you. People are not always going to understand the words that God give you. People are not always going to heed your warning or your instruction that God give you. What can I tell you? Prophesy anyhow. Persecution comes, but I'd rather be persecuted. I'd rather be persecuted for righteousness' sake than to be persecuted as a sinner, than for the hand of God to be against me, than for me to be in a mental strain and confusion because I am just simply not accepting and doing what God has called for me to do. Right? So 1 Peter 3:17 says this. Remember, it is better to suffer for doing good. Right? If that is what God wants, than to suffer for doing wrong. And I can tell you right now that God uses the suffering of prophets for a lot of different things, to humble us, to keep us, in line, to keep us near to his presence and so forth, right? And so I'm going to say this to you, prophet, if you have identified with this teaching on today. I want to say to you this: stop running. Just stop running. Don't run anymore. Yield to God. Listen, he's the one who created you. His hand is on you. He will be with you. Just like he told Jeremiah, he will stand up as a warrior beside you. You need not to be afraid. You need not to be afraid of demonic attacks. You need not to be afraid of the ridicule and the slander of others. Why? Because God has promised to cover, to shield, and to protect you. He protects his chosen prophets. He protects his servants. He covers his children. He is a good father. Listen, they might slander against you. They may lie against you. They may gossip about you. They may not receive you. But guess what? There is a reward waiting for you in heaven. There is standing ovations happening for you in heaven when you obey, when you begin to speak, when you begin to do what God has called you to do, when you begin to prophesy, and that one soul, that two soul is being saved from the pits of hell because of the word that you have given. Listen, there are rewards waiting for you, jewels that are being put in your crown. Come on here, somebody, because of your obedience to Christ. God is for you. And if God is for you, it is more than the world or the words of the naysayers that are against you. Greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. The enemy has no place. Come on here, somebody. He is not greater than you. It may seem as though he can frustrate you, right? He's very frustrating, right? Especially when he knows how to come in our weaknesses and so forth. But he's not greater than you. And God will always come to provide a way of escape for his prophet. So I want to encourage you today, prophet that has been running, to come back to God. Come back, sit in your seat, accept the call of God, say yes to him, begin to come in. He will teach you, he will prune you, he will instruct you on how to wage war against the adversary, and also how to embrace and handle the call, watch this, of the gifts that he's giving you. The gifts are not meant to run you out of your head. No, it's just a place of us understanding how to use them and where to put them, right? And so I hope this video encouraged you on today. I hope this video has turned at least one back from stop running. I hope this video has brought some clarity to some of you out there who have been in the place like Jonah, who have jumped ship and thought that jumping ship was going to help it, and then you realize jumping ship ain't helped nothing. I hope that somebody on here realized that, yes, I want to stop prophesying. Yes, I want to ignore all the things that I've seen. Maybe you've even tried to stop going to church, and then you realize that the prophetic met you right up in the grocery store, because you can't run from what's inside of you, right? And so thank you for watching on today. And if you know someone who would benefit from this, please like and share with them, because there's so many prophets out here who need to be encouraged and need to know that they are not alone. They are not alone. There are many more prophets out here with you who are in the same boat as you, but God has promised to give us peace. He has promised to give us help in times that we need it. And so join us back here next Thursday, same time, for our last and final episode of the Prophetic and Mental Health series, where we are going to be discussing the ways in which you can thrive, and you can thrive as a prophet in your mind, because God has called us to do so. God bless you and have a great week. Hi, my name is Janelle Edmondson, and I am a prophet of the one and only true and living God. You may know me from the Voice of the Prophet Ministries on Facebook or YouTube, where God uses me to release words of the Lord for the world, nations, regions, people, or even the church. So now, I have a question for you. Are you a prophet, or one who has been told that you are a prophet, but still seem to struggle with the God-given gift that he has placed upon your life? Like, where do I start? Can I really hear from God and relay that message with accuracy so effortlessly, like I have seen so many other people do? You may even question, God, is that really you speaking to me? Now, I must admit, though I am very confident now, I too had some real reservations about the gift of God that he placed on my life. And if you have related to anything that I have said thus far, I have something life-changing to talk to you about today. It is a book that I wrote called Chosen, A Beginner's Guide to Prophetic Ministry. It is for people just like you who are struggling with your voice, identity, and call. In it, you will learn the basics of prophecy, including the differences between the spirit of prophecy, the gift of prophecy, and the office of the prophet. You will also learn God's prophetic fingerprint that he gives to each and every one of his prophets, and the uniqueness that each one carries, the different anointings that each prophet can have. You will also learn why prophets can miss. You will learn how to discern God's voice and how he speaks to each one of his prophets differently, how to govern prophetic ministry with grace, and so much more. This beginner's guide will help you to understand your unique call and what God truly expects from his prophets in this end time. It's not as complicated as you think. All God needs is your yes. In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 1, starting at verse 25, Paul speaks about those whom God has chosen unto salvation, those who were not noble, those who were not very mighty or strong, but yet God still chose them. How similarly has God chosen his prophets in this time? The insecure like Gideon, the overlooked like David, those who may not be necessarily man's pick, but God still has chosen you. You have been chosen, set apart by God for his special purpose in these end times. God is raising up a new breed of prophets, those who will carry his word with fire and accuracy. those who will not be afraid to speak what he says with boldness, clarity, and most importantly, humility. Is that you? Well, you can pick up a copy of Chosen, A Beginner's Guide to Prophetic Ministry today on Amazon, Kindle, and for a limited time on Kindle Unlimited. You can also go to www.thevoiceoftheprophet.org to pick up your very own signed copy of this life-changing book. Let me introduce you to who God has originally always predestinated for you to be. A chosen prophet of God, set apart for his special purpose. God bless you.